Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen. So it is springtime here in Toronto, getting a little bit warmer. We're starting to work outside, and so I've pulled out the smoker and we started to make beef jerky, and we're working on recipes for the smoker and also for an open fire pit that use pop, Coke, Dr. Pepper, etc., in the marinades. And so I just did a beef jerky recipe and I've got this Dr. Pepper. And I thought, I'm going to figure out this Dr. Pepper or Coca-Cola cake thing. I've had a lot of people ask me to do one. And as I started to look at the recipes, I realized that at its core, all of those cakes are just a buttermilk cake, where part of the buttermilk is replaced with either the Coke or the Dr. Pepper. And depending on how strong you want the flavor, either all or just some is replaced by the pop. So this is Dr. Pepper, but it could easily be Coke or root beer or any pop for that matter. Any pop. All of the pops work, and here's why they work. They're liquid, obviously. So in a one-to-one replacement with buttermilk, they're still liquid. They bring sugar and flavor, which is something that we're looking for in this cake. But most importantly, they're filled with acid. Most soda pops in North America, phosphoric acid is the acid. And so that acid mimics the acid that you've got in the buttermilk. So that helps with your leavening. That helps with making the cake more tender. So I put that into a pot. This is one of those cakes where we just do everything in this pot, we melt it all together, and then we bake it. So into that pot, I'm going to put white sugar and brown sugar. And this cake is directly our buttermilk cake, chocolate buttermilk cake that is elsewhere on the channel. All I've done is swap out part of the buttermilk, and I took out the coffee because I don't want coffee in this one. So into the pot, Dr. Pepper, white sugar, brown sugar, butter, and chocolate. I'm going to have this on a medium heat, and we're going to melt all of this together. Now, as I was researching this cake, one of the things that I read over and over and over again on recipe blogs and also the websites of some very big food publications is that the carbonation in the pop, whatever pop, helps the cake rise and adds to that lightness. Sadly, that's just not the case. Not the case at all. In fact, by the time this is hot and it's all melted together, all the carbonation will be gone and there will be no carbonation left in the pan. It'll all be gone. But like I said earlier, that acid that's in the pop will help the other leavening agents react and rise. So into that buttermilk, I just put 2 eggs. I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla. And just to pump up that chocolate flavor, I'm going to put in chocolate liqueur. And you don't have to. If you want to leave it out, don't worry, you can leave it out. And for everyone who's worried about putting alcohol into the cake, there is less alcohol in this chocolate liqueur than in the vanilla that I added to the cake. And you don't think twice about adding vanilla. So I'm going to whisk this together. And for everybody out there who says they don't have buttermilk or they don't want to use buttermilk and what's a substitute for buttermilk, very easy. You can do what I did today because I didn't have buttermilk. I put a 1/4 cup of sour cream and then filled it up with 3/4 of a cup of milk. And then just stirred them together. You could use, if you don't have sour cream, you could use plain yogurt. Yogurt works extremely well. It's the same thing. It's a fermented product. Buttermilk here is fermented. If you take that fermented either sour cream or yogurt, mix it with the milk, you're going to come out to the same point. You could also use kefir if you're someone who has kefir in your fridge. If you're someone who is saying, oh, I just put lemon juice in with my milk, I suppose in an absolute emergency it works. And it works because you're adding that acid, the acid that you need to make the baking soda and the baking powder react to rise. But you're missing out on all of those fermented flavors. Really all you're getting is acid milk. And you're missing just everything else about buttermilk that makes the cake great. So I would really advise against using vinegar. You're missing out on so much flavor. So flour, baking soda, baking powder, and salt. And we'll just give that a bit of a stir to bring them together. Okay, it looks like the chocolate butter pop mixture is completely melted. Let's give that a check. Yeah, I'm going to say that's ready. So I don't really want it to boil. I don't want to bring it up that high in temperature, just enough that the butter and the chocolate melt together, which we've reached. So I'm going to leave it here on the counter to cool down a little bit before we add in the milk and egg. Okay, I'm going to say this is good. Not quite room temperature, but pretty close. So switch to the whisk and whisk in the milk, egg, vanilla mixture. And now I'm going to whisk in the flour. I'm going to do it in 2 or 3 additions. Don't try to do it all at once. It'll just be disaster. Okay, the last bit of flour, and you know what? The whisk worked all the way through. So that mixed up really nicely. Really nice batter. So I've got 2 round cake tins that I have greased the inside of and put one of these cake rings on the outside, wet. So hopefully I don't get too much of a dome. And I'm going to put them in the oven on this perforated baking tray so that air moves through. And we should get a really nice bake. Just going to transfer equally the batter into the pans. And I know you could weigh the pans and get it exact, but doesn't need to be exact. Get it close. Live your life. Don't worry about the small things. There's huge things to worry about right now. Maybe if I was baking in a tent, I might care a little bit more. If my cakes were completely even, but I doubt it. Probably not. So I've got the oven preheated to 350 degrees. I'm going to pop these in, and at about the 25-minute mark, I'm going to start testing them to see if they're done. And this is amazing. It really is. The cakes are out and they're cooling, almost ready for the frosting or icing, depending on where you live. Let me know down in the comment section whether you call it frosting or icing. I'm going to make a chocolate butter icing. So I'm going to start out with some butter into the stand mixer. I've got the wire whisk on, and we're going to whip this butter up. Now, as that's whipping up, I'm going to add a little bit of sugar in to start things off. Probably about 1/4 of all the sugar I'm going to use in this frosting. And sugar in frosting is one of those things that you can't really get to exact amounts. It's always going to be a little bit different depending on the day. So put that in. I'm also going to drop in a pinch of salt at this point, maybe a pinch and a half. And I have melted some chocolate, and I'm going to drizzle that in. The chocolate is in. It's coming together quite nicely. So I'm going to hit it with some Dr. Pepper. Since it's a Dr. Pepper cake, put some in the icing as well. I want about 1/4 cup. I'm just going to eyeball it. It'll be okay. Everything will be fine. And it's going to get kind of soupy. Okay, there we go. At this point, I'm going to put in a little bit of vanilla, amp up the flavor. And again, just like the cake, a little bit of chocolate liqueur. Just a touch, maybe about a tablespoon. And now I start putting in the rest of the icing sugar. And every once in a while, just stop and scrape down the mixing bowl. Just give it a hand, because there's spots that just are not going to get mixed in. There we go. Yeah, that'll do. That'll do quite nicely. Okay, so I guess I just have to ice the cake. And like I've said several times in the past, if you're here for a cake decorating tutorial, you are going to be sadly disappointed. Hey, Jules.
Ooh, that's pretty, Glen. Hey, friends.
All right. Okay, so, well, I mean, it's pretty within the realm.
Well, usually there's no icing.
Yes.
And icing, of course, is not necessarily a skill of either of us. So the fact that there aren't any
So this is
cake bits mixed in
Yeah.
says good job.
This is, as Paul Holly would say, that knife falls right through.
Oh, listen to you.
This is a Dr. Pepper cake. And most
The Dr. Pepper. Yeah.
And so most of the Dr. Pepper cakes recipes that I came across, I didn't model this on. I modeled this on one of our own cakes. But most of them were done in a 9x13 or an 8x8 sheet pan, and then had a thin glaze drizzled over the top.
Okay.
Which would be quite nice. But I decided,
That's very pretty.
let's do that.
All right, I'll get some forks.
Excellent.
I'm not waiting, although it's larger than a fork.
Now, I didn't put all of the icing that I made on the cake, because I find that usually most icing recipes use about a third more icing than I like.
That's lovely and chocolatey and moist and all the great things about cake.
That was a really moist, rich cake, isn't it?
I like that cake.
I don't know that I would, if you put that down in front of me, I would say that's one of the best chocolate cakes I've ever eaten. But I don't know that I would say, oh, it's got Dr. Pepper in it.
No, that's not obvious in any way.
No. So I did half and half, Dr. Pepper and buttermilk. You could probably go 3/4 Dr. Pepper and a little bit of buttermilk. You could probably go all in on the Dr. Pepper.
That might change the flavor
That might change
a
the
little
flavor.
bit. But I don't know. I'd have to, hey, give it a try. What do I know?
And I think, like I said earlier, any pop would do the same thing. It brings a liquid, it brings sugar, it brings that phosphoric acid, which is softening the cake.
Which is interesting because you could add all sorts of interesting flavors with your chocolate, right? Like, if you happen to like someone who likes like an orange and chocolate, like those, right?
Like an orange pop would go great.
Right. In this case, orange and chocolate go
Yeah.
really nicely together, and so that would be could be really tasty.
Yeah, an orange pop would be fantastic in this. I hadn't really thought
I think
of that.
so, but I'm not sure. I'd have to try it.
So I might, play with that. Let's see what happens.
You just never know.
Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.